Okay, so for this third lesson, we are going to learn something new. In the first lesson, we learned what we could do in object mode. We can like move this, rotate this, move this around, whatever. In the second video, we learned how we could use Boolean in conjunction to what we did in day one to get even more shapes and variations in our model. Now in day 3, we are going to discuss what limits we get with booleans and how we can resolve these. Over here, I'm just going to split my screen so I can basically open up my reference. Let's open up our reference image that we are going to use to create the model. So even by looking at this, we can tell that this won't be possible with simple booleans, and this is where we need to be more thoughtful about our approach, and this is where edit mode comes in. Now, before we dive into edit mode, we need to understand a few concepts. If you already know these concepts, just skip ahead. If you don't, this will be very helpful for you. So to go into edit mode, you can either press the tab key on your keyboard. I'm using this Spy add-on. If you're not using it, it will directly take you to edit mode. But for me, this Spy menu pops up and then I go into edit mode.
As soon as
As
I
soon
go
as I
into
go
edit
into
mode, I
edit
am
mode, I'm
greeted with
greeted
these
with these
three
more
more
tabs
over
over
here.
here, right? And these are basically my 3 ways of selection in edit mode. In object mode, we were dealing with objects as a whole, so there was no particular way of selection, but in edit mode, we are moving those points, and depending on how complex your shape is, you may have more or less of these. So you can see this one, it has a lot more than this simple cube over here. But for this simple cube, we have this dot, which is basically called a vertex. And for each of this vertex, you can select it, you can move it around, you can scale it, but scaling it like it's a point in space, so it's not going to do anything. We can also rotate this, but it's just a vertex, so it's not going to do anything. But if you select two of these dots that are forming a line, this is called an edge. This is the second option over here. And now I can also scale this, I can move this and rotate this as well. Third option over here, it's face. That's when two or more edges, they have combined together to form either a triangle or a quad. By quad, I mean this over here, this box that we see over here. By triangle, I mean if we have something like this, usually we want to avoid triangles. We keep our topology as quad as possible, but sometimes you do have some triangles and you can select them, you can move these around too. You can see this in this sphere by default. We have a bunch of these triangles over here. So let's go back in edit mode and we can see we have our vertex, edge and face. The shortcut for this is 1, 2, 3 on your keyboard. So if you press 1, you're in vertex mode, 2 is for edge mode and 3 is for face mode. Okay, now over here with this vertex or face mode, like with all of these, we can already do what we have learned, like G, R, and S, right? But again, we hit a wall somewhere around there. We need to be able to do a lot more with this, especially if you want to create something like this. We basically need to have more control points on our shape so we can like round it out, make more shapes. To do this, basically we can extend or extrude this shape. So let me just dissolve this for now. And if I select this face over here and I press E on my keyboard, and this is this option over here. If you click on it, this is the extrude button. I usually don't use these buttons. I just press the shortcut. But if you want, you can also use these tools over there. That's also fine. Now, if you press E, you can extrude this up. Now, Blender adds more points. We added more points to remember our shape, and now we can add more and more details to this new shape. And as I'm extruding, I can move this, I can rotate this, I can scale this just like what we did before. And the more points I add, the more detail I'm adding to my object. We don't want to go overboard, but we want enough detail to capture the barrel shape. Now, one way of adding more points is by extruding. The other way of doing it is by holding Ctrl R on your keyboard, and then you can scroll up if you want, and then if I click, you can see it adds these cuts over here. I can add them horizontally or vertically. And another way of giving your mesh more detail is by beveling. So if I select these corners over here, The way that I'm selecting all of this is by holding Alt and then clicking. So if I hold Alt and then click, it selects all of them. Now if I press Ctrl B, that bevels this out. Again, all of these tools that I'm mentioning over here are present over here. If you hover on top of them, you can see their name. So this loop cut, this is what we were doing with Control R. Right. You can see if I click over here, it's adding loop cuts. That's what I was doing before. And right now we're discussing this bevel over here. And for this bevel to work, we need to select a bunch of edges. And now if I press Control B, you can see it bevels it out. And then I can add or decrease points using my mouse wheel. Let me also enable my shortcut keys so we can see better. You can see I can also do this over here, Control B, bevel, and again, it gives more and more resolution and more detail. We'll see how to use all of this once we start using this. Okay, now sometimes you also want to add boundary to the mesh. Let's say this is supposed to be like going to give something a boundary. You select all of these faces and then you press I to inset. And then I can extrude this and now you can see it has depth in it. Again, if all of this doesn't make sense, you just need to understand all of these tools that you have in your disposal, and we'll use them one by one so we get more familiar with them. So first off, let's start with our barrel exercise over here. I'm going to go to my front orthographic view just like we have been doing before. I'm gonna go over here, add a mesh, and this time we're going to use a cylinder because it's already a rounded mesh. So we're already starting from a good point. And I'm going to press G, Z, and then type 1 on your keyboard.
Now I'm going to scale it up, let's say around here, something like this. Let's say this is what I want for my
barrel
size to be.
My barrel
right?
from top, and
Now
this is the barrel
my barrel
from
top and this is the bottom. I want this to be
like it's supposed to be
much
tapered,
rounded.
then
Like
gets
it's
rounded,
supposed to
and
be
then
tapered,
it gets
then
tapered
it gets
again.
rounded, and then it's taper again.
Now I can do this if I go into edit mode and I move this face up and I extrude this, scale this, extrude this again, scale this, extrude this. I can do this, but I'm going to do a lot of the work and it will be never perfect because I'm doing it by hand. Now, when it comes to edit mode, even with like booleans, a lot of the times you're doing problem solving, right? So you look at something and you decide what's the fastest way you can do this with like as less errors as possible. In this case, if I were to, let's say, Control R, add a loop cut over here, then press S and scale it up, something like this. Over here, Control B to bevel this and maybe increase the resolution by scrolling my mouse wheel up. You can see we get a very organic shape that looks really nice, and it took like half the time. Now, how would you know to do this from start? You wouldn't. It's something you build up as you do more and more exercises and as you see a lot of people and how they are doing stuff. It's just going to start clicking in for you and you'll be able to like problem solve a lot faster. It's just like doing puzzles. You start with simple things and you build on top of those. So let me just go back in and let's just do this again. I'm going to add a loop cut over here. I'm going to scale this out and it's up to you how much depth you want. And then I'm going to press Ctrl B over here and just scroll up to give it some nice resolution. Let's say something like this. Now over here, let me just change this image editor so I don't see this much things over here. I'm going to go to this top side, and on this top side you can see this barrel. It has some boundary to it and it's going down, right? We have already discussed this. To give a boundary, you select the face and then you press I on your keyboard to inset it. So for inset and bevel, there's one thing you need to understand. Let me just make an example over here. Let me just scale it super big. Now, if I select this cube over here and I press Ctrl B to bevel it, do you see how it's beveling unequally? This is much less than this. The reason is my scale is a lot bigger on this axis than it is on the other axis. So when you have unequal scale, Blender basically looks at your scale value over here, and this is the value that it's using to bevel or inset your model and a lot of other operations too. But for now, this is the most important one. So whenever you're beveling or insetting, make sure your scale is 1 to 1. Now let's say I type in 1, you can see my cube resets. I don't want to reset my cube, I just want Blender to create this cube in 1 to 1 ratio. To do this, if I go over here, object, apply and apply scale, now you can see this is reset to 1 to 1. So Blender is going to treat it equally on all sides. And then if I press Ctrl B, you can see now I'm getting equal bevel on all sides. This is an important concept and you should get used to it super early on. Now let's select this over here and I'm going to do the same thing, object, apply and apply scale. And then over here, I'm gonna go into face mode and inset this as much as I want. Let's say around here, and then I can extrude it something like this. Then over here, do the same thing, insert it, extrude it, and something like this. You can see now we're getting much more details on top of this. Now I also want to add these strips on top of my barrel, and these are going to be a different object, so I can give them a different color. To do this, we're gonna go into edit mode and I'm going to, so when you press alt click, it selects an edge loop. Edge loop basically means a ring. So over here, if I alt click over here, and you can see it selects it in this direction, and if I alt click in the middle here, it selects in this direction. Let me explain again. If I click in the middle here, it's selecting in this direction, and if I click in the middle here, it selects in this direction. Let's select a bunch of these strips in the direction that we want. So let's say I want one close to the top over here, another one maybe over here, and this one over here. Then one at the bottom over here and one over here. And let's say all these segments that I've selected, I want to bevel these out further. So Ctrl B to give them some thickness. And then I want to separate them out so they are a separate object. Okay, let's make sure I'm happy with the thickness. I think this looks fine. I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate them and P to parent them by selection. So now over here, I have these strips as a separate mesh and this is a separate mesh. Now for these strips, they should have some thickness on them. So I'm going to go over here to the modifier tab and add a solidify modifier and give it some slight thickness, something like this. Okay, now over here I'm going to add this wood line for my mesh. Again, it's a tiny detail that we can add that will make this look much nicer. Now selections in Blender are super powerful and they are like a million way of selecting something. In my case, I want to select this, let's say this edge loop over here and then this edge loop over here. And then I want Blender to remember to select each one after like leaving two of these unselected. We can do this if I select this one and let's say I select this one and then I press Ctrl Shift Plus on my keyboard. You can see it remembers my pattern and it does this automatically. Now this is not good because my pattern is unequal, so I'm just going to do it again and this time leave 3 instead. Now this looks a lot better. Now you can see I have equal amounts selected throughout the circle. Now I want Blender to select all of the vertical edge loops over here. To do this, I'm gonna go over here and select loops, edge loops. Now you can see we got this selection very easily. Now if I press Ctrl B, I can bevel this out, something like this, and now I can press E to extrude this and Alt S to inflate this in. So Alt S is like scaling, but it's not really scaling, it's inflating. And now you can see we have this kind of wood shape. Now I can right click, shade smooth, right click, shade smooth. Then over here, add a modifier and let's add in a bevel modifier. I'm going to increase the amount and increase the segments over here so it's nicely subdivided. Same thing, add a bevel modifier and let's decrease the amount and increases segments. Now you can see we get a very nicely subdivided mesh. Okay, I hope this made sense so far. If it didn't, it's fine. We'll do another simpler example that would be easier to follow. But let's just finish this off by giving it a color. So I'm just going to give this a solid wood color. I'm going to use this color over here, then go into my material preview. Let's just make it slightly darker. And for the roughness, because it's wood, let's just make it slightly less so it's not that reflective. Then over here I'm going to change this color to black, and this strip I want this to be metallic. And for the roughness I can bring it down, make maybe color, make it slightly more brighter so it's more silver. Sure, something like this. Okay, let's say this is something that I'm happy with. Again, if this was too much, this basically is a simple example that shows you most of the tools that you would be using in edit mode. So it's an exercise I would definitely recommend, but if you can't do this, then do the next one first and come to the barrel after that one. So let me just add this over here. I'm going to make a new collection and I'm going to change this to vase. So for this example, we're not making one model, but you can make as many as you need. We don't really need this, so I'm going to close this, and over here I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to world origin to reset my cursor. Then I'm going to press Shift A, go to image, reference, and open up my reference image. Now you can choose whatever image that you want. I'm just using this one, and you can see in this one we have a bunch of vases. This is a very good example to get comfortable with beveling, to get comfortable with extruding, and even inset. Now, first thing, I'm going to set up this image in a way that it doesn't get in my way. So first thing, I'm going to turn on this filter over here, and I'm going to turn this off. The reason is when this is on, I can accidentally select the image and move it from its place. When working in 3D space, you don't want to accidentally move your reference. That's just going to be bothersome. So let's just move it slightly back so it doesn't go into my model, and it's slightly away from my model. Then over here, go to this image properties and let's turn on only axis aligned. So when I'm looking in 3D space, I don't see the image. I will only see the image when I'm in my front orthographic view. Make sure when you add this image, you're in your front orthographic view. You can see right now I'm in my right orthographic view. So let's just delete this, go to my front orthographic view, and we add this image back. Now this turn this option off, only X is aligned. So now when we rotate, we don't see the image. And I'm also going to move it back just like we did before. Then over here, I'm also going to turn on opacity. And I do this because I like to see the grid behind me. It just helps me visually to look at the grid. And over here, I can turn this opacity just a bit less, like something that's easy on the eyes, whatever value works for you. Okay, I'm happy with the placement of my reference, and I'm happy with how everything is set up so far. I'm going to turn it off now. At any point, if I have to move it, I have to turn it back on, and then I can move it. If this is off, you can see I can no longer select this even if I wanted to. Now this is perfect. We can add another mesh over here, and we're going to do it with a cylinder. And over here, let's move the cylinder onto this vase. Now, to be able to see our reference and our model at the same time, we can either use X-ray mode. I don't really like using the X-ray mode, so I usually prefer using wireframe mode instead. Right now, I can see my model and my reference at the same time. Now, I'm going to scale this in something like this, and I'm going to place this to the bottom of the vase over here. I would say for all of these exercises, either start with the top or the bottom. Okay, now let's go into edit mode, and I'm going to switch to vertex mode. One benefit of using this wireframe or X-ray mode is, let's say if I was in solid mode and I selected this, you can see the back never gets selected. And that's a problem that a lot of newcomers face. So when you want to select something from the front and the back all together, you need to be in your front view and then go into wireframe. Um, Like you can be in any view, it doesn't really matter, but when you're selecting something in wireframe or in X-ray mode, it's going to select the front and the back. For this, I'm just going to move this down. Now, my suggestion would be to do as many vases as you can to get as comfortable as you can with this bevel tool in Blender and extrusion as well. So first thing, I'm going to press E and extrude this over here. Let's say this is the main point, this is a main point, this is a main point, and I'm just doing it based off of my judgment. Then I'm going to extrude this over here and maybe extrude this one more time over here. Okay, now over here, press Ctrl R to add a loop cut in the middle and scale it out, even bigger than the mesh itself. The reason why I did it like this, if I press Ctrl B now, it's going to shrink my mesh. You can see it right here. So I just made sure that I already thought about this beforehand and I scaled it accordingly. Now let's say this is the thickness that I want. Then if I press S to scale this, you can see it's scaling, but this is not the way I want to scale this. Instead, press S and then Shift Z so it doesn't scale on the Z axis, but it scales on the X and Y axis. Because our vase, we need it to be cylindrical, but it shouldn't be scaling up on the Z axis unless we want to do that. So now over here, I can go in and individually just place this by hand, and that's fine. It's still going to look nice because I got the bulk of the shape using my bevel tool. Again, to select the entire edge loop, I'm pressing holding Alt and then clicking to select the entire loop. Okay, now over here, I'm going to alt click on this edge and you can see I keep switching between edge mode, vertex mode and face mode depending on what's easier for me. And this is a habit that you build, and once you get used to it, it gets very easy. I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut and maybe select the base and increase that instead. Sure, something like this. Again, I'm just doing, there's not enough detail over here, so I'm just doing whatever I want. Over here, let's just go into wireframe mode. I want to scale this out. So instead of scaling this, I think it's better if I extrude this. So let's just try pressing E to extrude this. Then instead of moving it, I press escape. So it stays over here. Now if I press S and then Shift Z, it looks a lot better. Then over here, I can alt click on this edge and just slightly move it down. Control B to bevel it out, and it works in my favor. So sure, that's fine. And then over here, I'll bevel this out too, so it looks a lot nicer. Then again, this is a vase, so this face, it should be deleted. X delete faces, X delete faces, and for the bottom side, I'm just going to insert this in and extrude this up slightly, something like this. Right now, to give my vase some thickness, I can go over here, add a modifier and add a solidify modifier. Give it as much thickness that you like. Then over here, add a bevel modifier and change the amount of this. This is too much. And then over here, add a subdivision modifier and just subdivide it. Now you can see after I shade it smooth, this looks perfect. And again, it's up to me how much smooth bevel I want or how much sharper bevel I want. I'm making all of these judgment calls while I'm working on the model. So over here, if I want a more broader bevel, I can just press Ctrl B to bevel this out. And now you can see it looks a lot more rounded. And if I want a sharper bevel, I can press Ctrl B, but I keep it close. And now you can see it looks a lot sharper. So this is something you're deciding while you're working on the model. Let's say I like this look over here, so I'm just going to keep this as it is. Then let's start with the other example. I'm going to go to Mesh, Cylinder, scale it down, again move it over here. After you have done this part, make sure you press Ctrl A, apply scale, then go into edit mode, scale it up, something like this. Extrude it up, move it over here, extrude it up further, increase it, extrude it up, right. And you can see we already got this done, and I can press I to insert, maybe E to extrude this so it's slightly and then over here X to delete faces. Now, if I want, I can select this edge loop over here, and let's say I want to move this loop over here instead of right here. If I press G and Z, I'm moving it, but you can see it's altering the shape. I don't want it to alter my shape. So instead of moving it, I can slide it. To slide an edge, you press G twice, and now you can see it's sliding instead of moving, and you can tell this by this yellow line on your mesh. So G twice and slide it over here, and then if I want, I can just bevel this out. I don't really have to, but I just did it. Like there's no particular reason, I just wanted to. Okay, then over here, I'm going to make sure I'm getting enough of a... Okay, so when you're beveling something, it's up to you how much you bevel. So just be conscious, and you don't want to overdo this. Just get the shape as best as you can to match the reference. Let's add in all the modifiers just like we did before and mess up with the values as much as we want to get the look and the feel that we're going for with this video. I'll add a modifier, a subdivision modifier, and change it smooth. Okay, now we have the second one done. Then we can start with the third one. This is very similar to this one, so I'm not going to do this one. I'm going to try another one. Let's just say this one. So I'm going to go over here, Shift A, add a mesh cylinder, and let's just scale it down. Let's go over here to the bottom side, scale it down, move it, go into wireframe mode, something like this. I think it looks fine now. Go into edit mode, select the top and scale it down. Sorry, move it down, then scale it down. Let's just move it slightly like this. Okay, then over here I can see the bottom, it goes slightly up and then it has this big area of going up. Then E to extrude this, maybe make it more thicker, extrude this up, something like this. I think this is fine. Now Control R, I can see this is a main cut over here and maybe I'll add one over here. Again, I'm just doing it based off of experience. If you don't know, just test it out and you'll get more and more comfortable with this. Just place it out. Just test a few things out. Even if it's wrong, you can undo it. So let's say over here, I can just bevel this out, something like this. Then go over here, Control B and bevel this out. Right. Then over here, I can just scale this up. Let's say I don't want to do this by hand every time. Like when I'm scaling, a faster way to scale something is using proportional editing, which is this tool over here. So if you turn this on, if I press G, you can see I'm moving, but there's also a circle around my mesh, and this circle size I can increase or decrease with my mouse scroll wheel. So over here, if I press G and I scale it up, you can see how it's moving with an influence. And the bigger this is, the more it's going to affect my mesh. So this is something that helps you move things around super quickly. You don't want to always have this on, only just when you're using it. And with your bevel tool, don't go overboard. So I'm just going to turn this off. Otherwise, when I scale it, scales everything up. So let's turn it off, scale it now, and then bevel. Don't go overboard with the bevel. You only want to add essential loops. Not too many and not too less, just like enough to support the shape. Add a solidify. We are going to insert it, add a modifier. Let's just add a bevel, add a subdivision modifier for this bevel. Let's increase the segments to something like this. Right click, shade smooth. Right, and we got this shape over here again. This is meant to be like a fun exercise. So just have fun with this, make a bunch of vases, and you should be able to understand how to use the bevel properly. And it should also help you understand how to like get the shape without adding too much resolution. Best of luck with this. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment and I'll try my best to get back to it on time.